Hey folks, now we're going to take a look at making a cumulative frequency plot. And to do that, first we'll make a frequency table, then a cumulative frequency table, and then a cumulative frequency plot. So first of all, let's just take the file from last time and clean it up a little bit. We don't need any of this saved in this file. Those are just kind of one-off commands. This box plot command is useful, so I'll save it for later, but I'll comment it out so it doesn't do it every time. And I've prepared some code so that I don't have to write this all out for you at once to make cumulative tables, but I will step through it to talk about it. So this is some code I wrote. You can see I wrote it with the actual data in mind, but we can just change that here. And what this is going to do, actually I might just change it as I work through with it. So we have our data. I'm going to run this line of code again just to make sure everything's fresh, up to date. Then we took a subset of our data corresponding to Mr. C's class. Whoops. Let's do that. And actually let's just repeat that for Mr. A's class and Miss B's class. So like that. We'll do those. We won't need this for now. Having them separate is actually good, at least for the time being. And now what we're going to do is make a frequency table for Mr. A's class. So this is not quite accurate, but that's fine. So this can just be calculate a frequency table. So yeah, I prepared this beforehand, but it's still not perfect. Still need to fiddle. That's how programming works, basically. You always write a little bit and then figure out where it breaks and start fiddling with it until you get it to work. So here we have calculate a frequency table, frequencies for A, and what I'm doing here is I'm using the function table, which essentially makes a frequency table. That's basically what that function does, so it's perfect. But then I'm using this function as data frame to just convert the output from table into the type of output that I want, which is a data table. That's how my data is stored, just to keep everything consistent, nice and easy to deal with. So this is going to use mem A, so that's this subset here, and it's going to specifically look at the time data. We're not interested in the teacher, because the teacher is just the same for every row of that. It's Mr. A. Cool, so this will do that. So if I run this, and then I take a look at it, I realized that the overlay here is actually hiding what I'm typing, but I can also see that you can see what I'm typing after I type it in, because it moves up to here, so it'll work out okay. So this is essentially what we want. This isn't called what it should be, but we're about to fix that. And these are the times, and this is the frequency of those times. This is the number of times that 23 occurs in that class. So 23 occurs once, 31 occurs once, 38 occurs once, and so on. If I print out a few more lines to this, you can see that down here 43 occurs 3 times, and so on. Good. So yeah, let's just check that that's all. Just run that one more time, make sure it's all up to date. Oh, good. Now we're just going to fix up this header, well, this the label for this column, and that's what these 2 lines do. Whoops, need to make sure it's called the right thing now, and that should do it. There's an error here because I didn't fix the naming, but I fixed it now, it works properly. So if we have a look at that again, you can see now this is called time, and it's also adjusted these values to be the correct values. This as character, as numeric thing has to do with changing things out of factors. If you were watching the other videos closely, you saw me mess around with something to do with factors. Factors are an element of R that are very annoying, and you have to deal with them sometimes, but they can be dealt with fairly easily, and this is one way of dealing with that. You don't really need to know what it does exactly, you just need to know that this is what you do to fix that up. And this is how you get a frequency table in R. Cool, so that gives us all the frequencies. Now, for cumulative frequencies, it's actually really easy. There's a function that calculates what's called a cumulative sum. And that's this function here. And if we just give this function the frequencies, right, so that's this column, the frequency column of this table, this data frame, then it'll just calculate our cumulative frequencies, and we can assign those to a new column in this table, which is what this does. So we run that, and we take another look, and we see now there's a third column here, which are the cumulative frequencies. You see this time is in increasing order, that's important, and that's a consequence of how we calculated this table. And now these are the cumulative frequencies. You can see there's one person at 23, two people at 31 or less, three people at 38 or less, and so on. Now if we want to make a plot of that, we can just literally write plot and then give it the appropriate thing. So we want to type, we're going to give it time. Time is going to go on the horizontal axis, that's why we type it first. And then we give it cumulative frequency, because that's what we want to plot on the vertical axis. This L means I want to connect the data points with a line, and these are just my labels for the horizontal and vertical axes respectively. So if we do this, there we go. All right, so that's the cumulative frequency plot for Mr. A's class. Now if we want to add another class, we just have to repeat all of these calculations for another class to calculate the cumulative frequencies for that class. So I'm going to get rid of the comments for this because they take up space and are repetitive. And I'm just going to calculate all the frequencies for Miss B's class, just by replacing all these A's with a B. Easy enough. You could also do this with find and replace, but there aren't that many, so it's not a big deal. So we run this code, and now we should have a frequency table for Miss B, which will be called this. There you go. So there's the frequency table for Miss B. It's got cumulative frequencies as well. And now we could type this plot command again. We would get a cumulative frequency plot for Miss B's class, but what we really want is to just add it onto the same graph. And the way we do that is using the lines function, because we want to add a line to this. And the line we want to add is defined by the data in the frequencies for Miss B's class, which is called this. And we want to plot time versus the cumulative frequency. And to be able to distinguish the two, I'm going to change the line type, which is done like this. And what this will do is make the line that I plot for Miss B's class dashed. So we do that, and then you have the dashed line for Miss B's class on the same graph. Perfect. Easy. Now if you want to find the mode for some data, which is something I briefly mentioned earlier, I thought I'd just cover here as well, you can look at a frequency table. And that's as simple as that. So you look at the frequency table for A, for example, and we can have a look up through that data. There's lots of frequencies of 3 here, and one of those would be the mode. They would actually be the mode. The mode is the value that occurs the greatest number of times. So the value with the highest frequency, not cumulative frequency, just frequency. So in this case, it's a bit ambiguous. It could be either of these values. They're all equally the mode. In most data sets, there'll just be one mode, but not always. This is a good example of when that doesn't happen. Cool. And that's it for this video. Next, I'll show how to make a histogram as well, and that'll be just about it.